Hello and welcome to Crisis What Crisis, a new podcast designed to be a useful field guide as we all try to navigate and come to terms with a dramatically changed world. Whether it's personal, professional or both, crisis is without doubt the new shared experience. I'm Andy Coulson, a former newspaper editor, Downing Street Director of Communications and one-time inmate of HMP Belmarsh. For the last 4 years, I've been putting all my experience, the good and the bad, to use as a strategic advisor to business leaders. And I can tell you that the bad has been just as useful as the good. And that got me thinking that there are plenty of great podcasts out there where you can hear stories of success. There are far fewer where you can benefit from the experience of those whose lives have properly unraveled. So in Crisis What Crisis, I'll be talking to the embattled, shamed, courageous, ruined, damaged, resilient, unlucky and lucky survivors of crisis. Some names will be familiar, some less so, but all our guests will talk about their crises honestly, often with humour, but always in the hope that what they have to share might be useful to anyone facing down their own demons and challenges. Put simply, these are crisis stories worth sharing. If you agree and enjoy what you hear, please do give us a rating and review. That way, even more people will hear them, and that, in the end, is what it's all about. Crisis What Crisis is generously supported by Mindstream, a brilliant company who harness the power of music for personal well-being, whether it be music for meditation, to help focus, sleep, stress relief, yoga and fitness, rejuvenation, even grief and loss. Mindstream is there to improve human performance. I've tried it, it works, and I'd recommend having a listen to the Mindstream catalogue yourself. Just search Mindstream, that's mind with a Y, on Spotify. Thanks again for joining me. Our guest today for this bonus episode is the amazing Lemn Sissay MBE, one of Britain's most prolific writers of poetry first and foremost, but also for stage and TV. His powerful collections of verse are bestsellers, and his landmark poems adorn buildings in Manchester, Huddersfield and Addis Ababa. Lemn was the 2012 Olympics poet and is also the Chancellor of the University of Manchester. His memoir, My Name is Why, is a deeply moving, sometimes disturbing account of his personal crisis journey from birth to adulthood. Lemm's story, in summary, is one of a baby born in the late 60s to an unmarried Ethiopian woman who was studying in the UK. She was coerced to hand the child she named Lemn into the care of Wigan Social Services and prevented from getting him back. Lemn, who had been renamed Norman by a social worker of the same name, was handed to a white, deeply religious Lancashire family. He was to stay with them for the next 12 years until, with a heartbreaking absence of reason or justification, they simply handed him back into the care system, making it clear they never wanted to see him again. For the next 6 years, Lemn moved between children's homes, one of which was more of a prison than a home, where he suffered mental and physical abuse. But by 16, his talent for poetry was showing itself. At 17, he discovered his real name, and at 18, now out of care, he was on the long road towards finding himself. Lemn is a passionate campaigner on behalf of children in care and care leavers, not least with his brilliant Christmas dinners initiative, which we'll talk about a bit more later. Lemn Sissay, welcome to Crisis What Crisis. How are you?
I'm good, Andy. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Lemn, we talk a lot on this podcast about how to take ownership of your crisis, and we've had all manner of different examples, but none quite like this, if I can explain quickly. Every 3 months since the day you were born and for the subsequent 18 years, your every movement was recorded. You received those files, those council files, in 2015, and then approached the lawyer and began proceedings against the social services to shine a light on the way you and others were treated. Part of that process, the process of those proceedings, was to undergo an intensive psychological assessment of your life. When you received that report, you were warned not to read it alone. So on the 30th of April 2017 at the Royal Court Theatre, you had it read to you on stage in front of a live audience. That was the first time you'd heard it. An astonishing thing to do. I mean, were you sort of getting ownership of that crisis, if you like, by sharing it so publicly?
That was an extraordinarily electrified night, Andy.
Yeah.
Because when the actor Julie Hesmond-Dolce read the report out of the most personal personal details and dysfunctions as seen by a psychologist after doing sessions with me. After hearing them the first time, the audience was hearing it at the first time as well, and they were willing me on. You know, they were with me. Every part of me was examined by the psychologist for damage that had been done by the care system over 18 years. And that's my sexual self. That's my, my intellectual self.
Totally laid bare.
All my dysfunctions. And that is the middle of the crisis, was what damage has been done to me over 18 years as described by a psychologist. And I called a friend from Wales, where there was a very big inquiry into the crisis of child abuse in children's homes. And 12 young adults committed suicide while that case was going through the court system. And part of that was their reaction towards the psychologist's report.
Right.
I checked it all up with the newspaper coverage and what have you, and it happened. And I didn't want to be isolated right in the middle of this storm.
Yeah.
So I brought the entire audience with me. I wrote a blog. Within a week, the Royal Court said, "We'll give you the theatre for one night." The director, John McGrath, said, "I'd like to direct this, Lem." Julie Hesmond-Dolch, the brilliant actress, said, "Lem, I'll play the psychologist. I'll read the report out to you." And my primary reason to do it was because I'm not going to be isolated by what happened to me. I'm going to out them. It was a moment of pure inspiration.
Yeah.
I feel safe on stage. I don't feel separate from the audience on stage. I just feel safe there. And it wasn't a way of doing dramatic theatre, although it was theatre at its most dramatic.
Yes.
It was me saying, I feel safe here. All my files are public records, pored over by social workers throughout my childhood. And so why should this be private as well? But, I just realized something. It's that my dysfunctions were in there as well, in that psychologist's report that was going to be presented to the court.
Mm-hmm.
So my vulnerabilities were there as well. It's interesting because I could look at it's interesting to me, obviously, because it's my story, but I can look at my past, Andy, and I can go, oh, it's their fault, it's what they did, it's everybody else's fault. Oh, this poor baby. But actually, there has to come a point where you take responsibility for your own actions.
Well, we'll get onto that, because the absence of bitterness in everything that you write and say, Lem, is remarkable, and I want to ask about that. But when you look back at your story, where do you put the first sort of pin in the crisis map? One assumes it's right at the beginning when your mother was forced to hand you over. Or for you, is it when your foster parents, who you thought you would be with forever, who were mum and dad, decided with frankly utter callousness to kind of hand you back after 12 years? Where does that pin go in your mind?
For me, it is 1966, 67, 66 before I was born, 67 when I was born. And it's the relationship that my mother had with the social worker whose primary aim was to get me from her and give me to adopting parents.
Yeah.
He named me after himself.
Yes.
So that's where I saw the sort of original lie, kind of. And all of the dysfunction, the institutional dysfunction, came from that lie and the separation of me from my birth mother, for no other reason other than The social worker thought that was the right thing to do. I don't know why. I still don't know why. It's all connected to Steve Coogan's film Philomena.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mother and baby homes.
Yeah.
And they were a system of... Well, this podcast is called Crisis, What Crisis? And women who were not with their husbands who were pregnant were seen as a crisis.
Yes.
Waiting to happen.
Yes.
And so to solve that crisis, take the child, get the child adopted, get the woman to sign the adoption papers at her most vulnerable,
yes,
locked away from her own family.
And your mum refused to sign those papers.
Yeah, because she didn't want me adopted,
Which, when you think of the sort of circumstances in that moment, shows the incredible strength, actually, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And in fact,
how much pressure must she have been under to sign that?
Absolutely, and cajoling and kind of there was a very sort of very sneaky way of getting these women to sign the adoption papers. The social workers would sometimes say, "Oh, don't worry, you'll see your child in later, in a few months," knowing that the women would never see the children again. And a lot of Irish women went through this.
Yes,
Andy, actually.
Yeah. When you read your memoir, Lem, and I would urge anyone listening to do so if they haven't already, because it is utterly extraordinary. There is understandable anger, but as I touched on a second ago, there's a total absence of bitterness. How have you managed that? How do you avoid? We call it on this podcast the bitterness bullet, but how have you avoided it?
That's such a lovely phrase, the bitterness bullet. I mean, I've been angry, Andy, I've been angry. I don't think anger's something to be frightened of or something to deny, the moment you find it. It's not like I've tried to handle this well. I just realized that I can't carry that anger because it just gets bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? It's like, if you think that the anger is like the centrifugal force in you, it will just get bigger as the more it generates itself. And ultimately, in my case, I don't say this for anybody else, but it consumes me.
Yes.
It's the gift that doesn't keep on giving, because anger...
It's the problem, and it's your past, obviously, but it's the problem continuing to have control over you, and that that you're losing when that's happening. I mean, is that how you feel? But there is such a difference between anger and bitterness, though, and there's no bitterness. There is anger.
But I think
there's no bitterness.
I think working through anger, you get to lose bitterness. Because I don't think anger's like a country on its own that you should stay in. I think I worked through my anger, not over it, not under it, not denying it. Do you know what I mean? I find angry people actually, I'll talk for myself, but I denied that I could ever get through it when I was angry. That's the situation. Look at my past. Look at this. There's nothing I can do. It's immovable. And it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And every relationship, every friendship, I would have to, at some point introduce this furnace, this all-consuming furnace to my partner or to my friend. In fact, it got to the point, really, where I'd be saying, look, you don't really want to be with me. You don't want to have a relationship with me because I'm going to have to introduce you to the furnace at some point. And you're just going to burn. And so why don't we not do this? And you know what I mean? And that's a very lonely state to be in.
That's heartbreaking, Lem. That the past is stopping you from being able to move forward in a relationship, isn't the example that you give there? I mean, that's heartbreaking.
Well, this all comes down to relationships at the end of the day. I believe anyway. And all of these issues, all of these crisis, what crisis, it all comes down to, how do you treat your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your partner? How does it reflect in your intimate world?
Because your crisis can never be isolated, because it's obviously going to impact on everyone around you, and how have you then, because as you know, this podcast is all about trying to give those lessons to others in crisis. You know, how have you resolved that then? Because there's also a tremendous amount of forgiveness in your memoir, not least the forgiveness you've shown your foster mum, Catherine Greenwood. You know, and given the heartlessness of that decision, Lem, given away by people who'd stopped you from going back to your birth mother, because she did reach out to the social services to try and get you back. You know, people who you called mum and dad for the first 12 years of your life, and then you're told off you go and don't come back, all because you'd, I don't know, taken some biscuits and had a row with your foster brother over some cricket stumps. How were you able to get that forgiveness in your life, Lem?
Well, it's a daily project. You know, some days I don't feel as forgiving, if I'm really honest. But the question is how. I accepted that I deserved to be angry. And, well, the key answer to how, ultimately, is that I forgave my foster mum and my foster father and my brothers and sisters. And I forgave them fully, because I realized that I thought that what had happened to me, I thought that on some level, I thought that it was something about me. That what had happened to me, on some level, I thought, oh, well, this was bound to happen because I am not a good person. So I've attracted this thing, you know. So on some level, I did think that. And by forgiving my foster parents was a way of saying, Lem, it wasn't your fault. That capacity, I believe, is available to everybody. And these are not physical things, you know. The ability to forgive, it's all within my power to forgive. And I never thought it was. I didn't feel like it was in my power to forgive. And therefore, I thought of myself essentially as weak and as defined by the crisis that happened to me. And people would say, oh, no, you're really strong, Lem. You've come, you're in the middle of this horrible stuff that's happened to you. And I think I was weak because I was defining myself by the crisis that had happened to me. And by forgiving, I was saying, this is not the definition of me.
Yeah.
What happened to me is not the definition of me.
Do you mind telling us about the conversation with your foster mum when you did forgive her?
The time I forgave my foster mother, I called her, and she came to meet me, and she brought my foster brother with her. And I met her on Buckingham Palace Road.
When was this, Lem? How old were you?
Oh gosh, it's actually in my blog, the year. So I think it was 2013, something like that.
Okay, yeah.
And because all my family are from the north, but they live now in the south. All my foster family. So I called my mum to meet her, and which is unusual, my foster mum. And I met her at a cafe, and my brother came, and my brother's told me that he couldn't remember anything about me. And I forgave her. And I told her that I wanted to meet her to forgive her. And
how did she react?
there's a Malk. Sorry, there's actually two meetings that happened, and they're both squashing themselves together. I need to present the story to you correctly. I met my mother at the South Bank Centre, where I was artist in residence, and took her for a meal. My foster mother, and I said to her that no, she asked me for forgiveness at the first meeting.
Yeah.
My foster mother asked me for forgiveness. And I said to her, what for? And she said to me, for listening to you. That was the only narrative that she could hold on to.
Right.
When I went into care, it's in my book, when I went into care, my foster family said that it was my choice to leave them.
Yes.
As a 12-year-old child.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that...
When in fact, you were very clearly manipulated into that situation. Yeah.
But that's the story that they told their own family so that they could survive and live together. So my aunties and uncles, my brothers, my sisters. So my mother has had to believe that I chose to leave them at 12.
Yeah.
She's had to believe that. And this was, 40 years later I was meeting her? 45 years later?
Yes.
So by that time, the story had solidified in the family.
Yes.
You see? And when she said that, it made me really angry. And I walked her back to the bus station, at the bus stop outside the South Bank there on Belvedere Road. And off she went into the distance. And I was lost. I actually did blog about it. I wrote the blog the day after. And I just wept. I wept so heavily that day, on my own in the South Bank Centre, at a amongst all of that concrete by the Thames.
Mm.
It's funny, isn't it, how these stories come? Because I'm not saying woe is me right now, okay, Andy? I'm just saying this is what happens.
That's very, very clear.
When crisis happens, there is crying time.
So having left the South Bank, Lem, and it having had that effect on you, were you then able to, because you had a second meeting with your mother, and at that meeting, were you then able to get to the truth?
Yeah.
Were you able to get her to see the truth of what happened?
Well, what I learned is that in that first meeting, I was trying to get something from my forgiveness. I wasn't ready to forgive in that first meeting. I wanted them to own my story. I wanted something from them. The second meeting, I went purely to forgive my foster mother and the whole family, and I didn't want anything from them. I didn't want them to necessarily say sorry, or I didn't need them to explain what their role was in what they did to me, etc. It was my job to forgive them.
Mm.
So I went to that cafe, and my foster mother brought her sisters, and her sister brought her children, and there's lots of. I think of it as them protecting my foster mum at a vulnerable time in her life.
Yeah,
and I didn't like that. I came on my own. Of course I did. That's how the story rolled for me.
Yeah,
I was on my own. That's how it's been. And I forgave her fully, and I could see my auntie's irritation at me, as if this is not how the story goes. As if she was saying, "No, the story is that you left us, that we saved you."
Yeah,
It's like, that's not the story. I thought, but I can't argue with you in my head or my heart anymore, and so I've got to forgive you, because I've got to release myself from the bondage of anger and hatred and bitterness and loss. And
did you show her? I don't think you had the papers, obviously, by that stage, presumably.
oh no.
Do you know if she ever read any of those papers? Because of course the papers prove with beyond doubt what happened. It's documented.
So now we're getting to why I wrote the book.
Mm.
I wrote the book because I wanted them to know, no, this is what happened to me.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, regardless of your narrative about why I was put into care, never mind that. This is what happened to me while I was in care. This is what they did.
Mm.
This is what a system did that was built to care, but actually can't, you know, and that's another story actually altogether. But I wanted them to know. And so, you know, so she got the book, you know, she got the manuscript beforehand.
What reaction?
She made a couple of complaints that were to do with little facts.
Right. She didn't question what
No.
the now central and accurate narrative.
No, not at all. And I feel okay with that, but I also feel a certain amount of just compassion for her and for the whole family. Because I've had to use the media to tell the story and to investigate it.
Mm.
Okay? So all I wanted to do regarding media was say, have a look.
Mm.
Go ahead. Go as far and as deep as you can. You know, question the veracity of the story. Question me. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And because this is what happened. And I've used my career as a writer, as a poet, you know, say career, that's a bit of an oxymoron, but it's happened. It's what happened to me. I've been a poet, you know, by profession all my adult life. So when anybody went to my story, I'd say, okay, now you want to go to my story, please take a look. You know, and in many ways, it's been too fantastic for the various bits of media coverage that I've had over the years to carry.
Mm.
But there have been key documentaries that have been made in my life which have sort of just dug a little bit into the story. Why am I telling you this? Because that family's not media trained. You know, they're not, you know, this is not, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a different world. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have been saying, I need this narrative to be told to somebody. This is the only way I've been able to do it.
Yes.
It's the only way I've been able to do it. And I want them, I wanted them for years to respond. I was like, tell me I'm wrong.
Right. Okay.
Tell me I'm wrong for drawing this out.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong. Let's get this. Let's do this.
But they never have.
No, they never have. And that you really understand me, don't you, Andy? You know, they just can't have that dialogue.
No.
Whether it's with an inquiry from the Guardian who are saying, listen, this guy's talking about you. Don't you want to, you know? Or whether it's me sat across the cafe from my mum.
But that is about their own guilt. I mean, one of the things you mentioned a moment ago, I'm really surprised to hear that your foster brother, who is not that much younger than you, what, sort of 14, 15 months younger than you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
He's sort of age 10 when you were given back?
Yeah.
Really? No memory of his life?
Well,
until the age of 10?
So let's just have a look at this. He has an argument with his older brother about the cricket stumps.
Yeah. And not long after, he never sees his brother again.
He never sees his brother again. How, and not only that, but his parents are telling him, Norman doesn't want to be here. He doesn't want to be with us.
Yeah.
How traumatic is that? Yes,
no, that is absolutely a truly traumatic event for a 10-year-old boy.
And it just he was like blonde, blue-eyed, introvert. I was dark skin, big smile, extrovert, and we just had that sibling love for each other, which manifested itself in all those ways that we now know kids do, especially boys,
Yeah.
And we were both fighting for the love of our mother, which is what you boys do as well,
Yeah.
I mean, God, it's all, I'm not religious, but it's almost like biblical. I believe in God, but I'm not really, it's like the dark bad force and the light good force,
Yeah.
But that's just not, it's just not true. We were just brothers, So I think he was traumatized. I think that's why he could not remember, and he wanted to be honest with me. I think.
Yes.
He wanted to say, "Lemn, I can't." And I do remember realizing that my foster parents would be wiping the memory of me.
Yeah, exactly. Because who knows what conversations took place, as you say, subsequent to that day when you left. And
all I know is
that would have had, as you say, a deep effect on a 10-year-old boy. One of the most harrowing passages of your book, Lemn, comes when you are, imprisoned. There isn't another word. In a remand centre, Wood End in Manchester. You're 17. You pretty quickly have a mental breakdown. You're walking the streets barefoot. You're very obviously unravelling, and yet no one steps in at any point. Are you able to recall, then, what you were drawing on at that time to survive day to day?
Oh, yes, I am, Andy, because I remember being in Wood End as the centre, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm right. This makes sense. This makes sense. This is the institution saying, we're going to get you, and we're going to get you. And by the time they'd locked me away, I was like, of course this makes sense.
So it's proof of the proof of the paranoia, if you like.
That was one exactly.
And you found resilience in that, Lemn.
Oh my God! I was trying to say to people, the system does not know what to do with me. It doesn't know what to do with me because it, in some ways, is to blame for the situation I was in. I did not know what it had done to get me into the situation that I was in, but I knew that it did not know what to do with me, and it did not know what to do with its own actions. And so it just locked me away. When in doubt, prison. So it was, to me, when I went into Wood End Assessment Centre, I was like, I get it, folks. You really do not know what you're doing, do you? And now you're going to give me the punishment.
Right.
Oh, that's great. There is no crime, but you're going to punish me because that's what you do.
Yeah. But at the same time, Lemn, you're unraveling, right? You're having a mental breakdown.
So in acknowledging that, I'm now in a Kafkaesque nightmare. I'm now locked away in an institution where you have to walk down the corridors in size order, where the staff watch you in the showers, where you're never alone, locked in your bedroom with a buzzer if you want to go to the toilet, and a night watchman who comes to the bedrooms to take you out. You're amongst people who've killed, who are on remand for all kinds of horrific stuff, and you're a kid in care. And it's horrific. Now, my depression started before I went into Wood End Assessment Centre. So they locked me away knowing that I was suffering a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
Which meant, yes, going barefoot. But I've got to say that going barefoot was my rebellion against the system, but it wasn't hurting anybody. And nobody said that it was illegal. I mean, all I wanted was for them to tell me to put on shoes, to demand that I put on shoes. The staff in the children's home didn't. They didn't. Geez. So Yeah. So when I was locked away in Wood End, I thought, I get it. I've got you all.
Yeah.
I saw the staff in Wood End. I saw how they were not interested in any of the young people's pasts. This was a correction place. This was the short, sharp shock, etc., etc. And I kind of don't subscribe to that way of thinking or living.
Yes.
You know, I don't define people by how much by whether they're good or bad. It's this binary thing that institutions love: right, wrong, good, bad. No space for empathy, understanding.
It was much worse than that though at Wood End, wasn't it? I mean, there were a lot of beatings. There's a lot of physical violence as well as the kind of mental.
There was a lot of physical violence at Wood End. I think we used to play murder ball. You know, which is this: you have a medicine ball, and you have boys at one end of the sports hall and boys at the other end, and you had to sort of, I don't know, grab the ball, or we used to play bulldog as well, and British bulldog, I remember. And these were just ways of the staff getting the young people to fight and get out all of their, you know, teenage stuff. It was very, it was very sick. It was a sick place. It was ill, institutionally ill.
Yeah. You went back to the Greenwood's house on one occasion, I think, didn't you? To demand to see photos of yourself as a child.
I did.
Turned up at their door.
Yeah, when I was maybe 15, because I realised that I didn't have any. It's funny, isn't it? As you're going through your late teens, I realised I have no relativity. I'm losing relativity. I'm losing a sense of myself. I'm starting to become hidden in plain sight. I've got nobody who's known me for longer than a year, because I've been in different children's homes, and I started to realize I'm going to be leaving care soon, and I'll have nobody, and I'll have nobody who's known me for longer than a year. Because when I left the foster parents, I was in different children's homes, and I started to realize, oh my gosh, everything's about relativity. You, Andy, are the son of somebody, the brother of somebody, or the sister of somebody, or the only one, you have a line, you have in your head, you have a hologram of a photo album which attaches you to places, people, and things. And I didn't have that. I had no relativity, no family. And so I needed photographs. Everybody seemed to deny my existence. So I knew this at 15.
So they let you in?
Yeah, they let me in, yeah. And I asked, yeah, that was the funny thing, you see, because they could never tell me really to go away, even though actually they did a couple of times. Anyway, yeah, they let me in, and my foster mum got out the photo album, and she shielded her arm so that I couldn't see the photographs. And then went through the photo album and chose a couple of pictures and gave them to me. And I'll never know why she wouldn't let me see the photographs. Yeah. But I do believe they tell a story.
Right.
You see? I do believe that those photographs in those albums, of which there are many, tell a story of how I was placed in that family.
Yeah. This is all happening at a very volatile time in this country. You know, you've suffered racism throughout your childhood, Lem, but as a young black man trying to find your identity, again, without anyone with you, anyone behind you, you know, demonstrates just, you know, astonishing resilience. You believe, though, that resilience is in all of us. Is that right?
I do, yeah. I mean, the capacity to forgive, resilience, I think we have more resources in us than we realize, especially at times of crisis where you may feel low on resources. I think there's a trap door that you can go through,
Yes.
and there are rooms full of possibilities. There's one room of resilience. There's another room of forgiveness. There's one room where you can. Well, we'll get to the three points later, but there is a place where you feel like, if you feel like you're drowning, there are various air pockets that you can sit in and find energy and sustenance, spiritual, personal, political. Yeah.
We often talk on this podcast about how good can come from crisis. Do you see your poetry as the positive product of yours? When you read the Care Papers, it's clear that there was a light shining in you, Lem, from a very, very young age, talent and a sort of need to express yourself. Have you wondered what would have happened to your poetic power, if I can put it that way, if a different door had opened for you, that you'd found your way back home?
Well, I can't. That's a really good question, and maybe my imagination should allow me to answer it better. But I can't envisage any other way of me being other than the way that I am. I can't envisage any other way of it being other than the way it is, the way it was. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I was talking to somebody yesterday actually about this. Like, I knew that I was a poet from very early on. And it was very clear to me. I was speaking to a poet a teacher called Kate Clancy, a wonderful woman, actually. And she was saying when she teaches, there are certain children who have a propensity towards a particular art form. Could be dance, could be poetry, could be painting. And she said they just shine. You know, they're no better than anybody else. They're no better than any other child. It's just that with a particular area, they've just locked in. They're locked, loaded, ready to be fired. You know, ready to be to get on and do what it is that they were destined to do.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you more the chosen one. You know, it just means that, oh, well, he's going to be a poet.
But do you see because your poetry is obviously such a fundamental part of who you are, are you able to see it as the result of what happened to you, or not?
Oh no, no. Well, that's a good question. I don't think so. I think that I was a poet anyway, and that I would have been writing about other stuff. I mean, I'd probably be a much better. Well, I know I would be a much better writer because I wouldn't have spent so much time doing this family stuff that I've done over the years. But no, I think I would be probably writing for children or writing novels, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, plenty of time.
Yeah. You know how it goes. Yeah.
As we touched on earlier, you spent 30 years fighting for access to your papers. You also, from the age of 18, spent many years tracing your birth mother, dad, brothers, sisters, various other relatives. Your dad, who was a pilot and who sadly died in an air crash. Obviously, you didn't meet, but your mum now lives and works for the UN in New York, I think.
That's right.
Your family on both sides is made up of very successful, proud Ethiopians. And yet you still don't see yourself as part of that or of any family.
Well, I met them at 20. My mum at 21. It took her 8-9 years to tell me who my father was. I met him. I certainly didn't meet him. I made a documentary about finding him when I was 29 called Internal Flight on the BBC. It's online. And then I've met my final sisters and brothers on all sides, on my father's side and my mother's side, by the time I was 32 or 34. So at 34, let's say it's 34, I'd found every family member. Yeah, they've got their own crisis, their own stuff to work through. They're a diaspora family. They had to flee Ethiopia, and then, so they're, they're out in the world, living their life with their losses and their stuff, family stuff. So I feel that I don't know. They I can't speak for them. I don't know what they're. I think I've been quite a bit of a shock to them. Yeah, I think I've been quite a shock to them.
But there must be pride as well with your mum. She must have been proud to discover that this child that she gave up was so unbelievably resilient and so unbelievably talented, and that through the resilience, the talent has now, shows itself very clearly, very publicly, very successfully. Have you had that conversation with her?
No, not really, because she's right at the heart of the story. So I think it's quite shocking for her to see herself. She's a very private person. She actually is a very private person.
I noticed in the documentary you made with Alan Yentop, which is a brilliant bit of telly, that she wasn't interviewed.
Yeah, they asked her, would she be interviewed? And she was like, no, because she's I think she's traumatized by it. And I think I am a memory of a very traumatic time in her life. And she doesn't want to reject me ever. But it's really difficult for her to embrace that time of trauma, which I am a direct reminder of. I think I am possibly a reminder of quite a lot of trauma for my birth mother. She lost me, then she had to go back to Ethiopia. Her father was dying. He eventually did die. She married the vice minister to finance under the Emperor Haile Selassie. She had 3 children within a very short time, and by 1974, she had to flee the country and never returned. So all families have their crises and their traumas, and she was having hers, and it just happened to be around the time that I was born, and then she lost me, couldn't get me back, had to build a life with that trauma, and I was the embodiment of it. So a lot of adopted and fostered people, when they find their birth parents, it's not an easy relationship, and it's not an easy relationship with my mother. Although I spoke to her a couple of days ago, and she's always kind and nice. But sometimes it's not fair for us children to drag our parents back into the memories that they've wanted to forget.
I think that's I think that is a sentence in itself that, brings to life your ability to avoid bitterness and embrace forgiveness, if you don't mind me saying so.
Thanks, Andy.
Let's talk about the power of humour, Lem, because you sprinkle it liberally in your book. On one occasion, you're being put through some kind of psych test, I think, in one of the care homes. You're asked what kind of tree you are, and your answer is a poetry. Brilliant.
Isn't it great that we're talking now, and that's what I wrote then?
Yeah, it really
you have the evidence, right?
Exactly. You're laughing at them. I love it. How important has humour been to you, Lem? You often, when you're talking about your story, you often give the audience kind of permission to laugh at it. It's an important thing for you, am I right?
Yeah. I was a funny kid. I'm a lot less funny now, unfortunately, or fortunately. I mean, being constantly funny actually is quite is quite draining in an adult. You know what I mean? So I had to lose that trait. But when I was a child, it was like my primary purpose was to get people to smile and to laugh. Really, until I could laugh no more, really. You know what I mean? And so I think that strain of me is still in there. And I do love a laugh. I think if humor is part of your core personality, then it'll never leave you. And it's never left me.
Is it a tool though? Is it a tool in crisis?
Well, we have to watch out because it's quite easy for humor to be a tool of denial in crisis, and that is an issue. Okay,
yeah.
but yeah, the ability to laugh and levity is really important in this in a crisis. It even makes me smile thinking about it, you know.
So Christmas is approaching fast, Lem. You talk about how Christmas was always the worst day for you in care, that it was the day of no escape, nowhere to go. Some time ago, you set up the Christmas Dinner Project, which provides a fantastic Christmas day for care leavers, young care leavers between 18 and 25. Tell me about it, please. Tell me why it's such an important project for you.
Well, Christmas was the worst day of the year for me, as was my birthday, because they were reminders of everything that I'd never had. And they were times when everybody went back to their own dysfunctional families, and not having that made Christmas a time of isolation and depression, really. What can I say about it? Right now, this minute, Andy, there are groups of men and women meeting around England, around the UK, to put on a Christmas dinner for care leavers on Christmas Day. It's one of the best things about this. It's that it's run by the community. There's no empirical structure. Each Christmas dinner is autonomous.
Right.
And those groups will go out into their community. They will share the story of the care leaver on Christmas Day, and various people in the community will give things for those young people to have on Christmas Day, and that's whether it's food, Christmas presents, etc. Now, here's the deal. Everything has got to be top-notch. The presents have got to be jaw-dropping. The food has got to be the best food. What would normally happen is we would get taxis to bring the young people to a venue. The venue's got to be dressed like a winter wonderland.
Yeah.
The chefs have got to be the best chefs. The food has got to be top notch. There's no serving gruel out of bowls. There's no waiting in a line so that you can get stuff through a hatch. The venues have got to be dressed as Christmas venues. The presents have got to be one major present and then lots of other presents. All right? There's obviously public liability insurance. There's referral forms for the young people. They have to have a referral form to be there, et cetera, et cetera. All of the checks and balances there. We don't have to leave it to the social services. The community outside can do something for the businessman, the businesswoman, the shopkeeper. I was just talking to somebody yesterday from Salford who said, Lem, my friend's got lots of big giant Toblerones that she wants to give as present. Now, Toblerone is part of a Christmas package, isn't it? You get it in the bag, the chocolate. We've got in Hackney here, we've got money being given. They've raised like £10,000 to get small tablets. For the young people on Christmas Day. Tiny Temper called up the other day and gave some money to the Hackney Christmas dinners. It's happening all over the country, and and most of the social services know about every Christmas dinner because there's members who are on the Christmas dinner steering groups, but it's absolutely got nothing to do with the institution. It runs on its own.
And you're making it happen despite COVID this year.
There's 18 of them. There's Jersey, Manchester, Leeds. Every one of them has said, we are going to do this. Cambridge, Jersey, Oxford are not doing it this year, but they normally do a Christmas dinner. Liverpool, Leeds, they're all over the place. And it's just groups of people meeting, 10 to 15 people meeting, saying, how can we make this happen? This year, it's going to be deliveries, going to people's houses and delivering hampers for them.
Lemn, the care. Well, congratulations on the project. I mean, it's just wonderful. But the care system in this country obviously is very different to the care system that you endured. There's been a lot of change.
Yes.
What's your view on how we handle, children in care, and also because this project of yours is obviously geared towards those young care leavers. What's your view on how, as a state, we now handle our children?
It's what I would like to change in my lifetime probably is the wider society's view of what a child in care is. That's what I want my task to be, so that people start to see a child in care as a solution waiting to happen rather than a problem. Because if you define a child as a problem that you need to solve, then everything that child does is in answer to a negative. Okay, is in answer to a negative. Whereas if you have children yourself, you want them to aspire because you think that they can be brilliant.
Yes.
With a child in care, it's often you want them not to be a problem. You want to solve the problem that they're in.
Yes.
Whereas actually they may have arrived to you because of a problem, but they are not a problem. I want them to have the aspirations that you would have for your own children. Okay? You don't know if your own child is going to be a rocket scientist, but if your own child says they want to be a rocket scientist, you say, right.
Yeah.
You go for it.
Give it a go. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that action, that thought, that smile on your face and on mine, that's it. That's what a child in care needs. That exact moment that we just identified then.
Yes.
That is what a child in care needs, and it's not what they have. It's a big one.
Yeah. When talking about crisis, some experts believe that peace comes from, acceptance, but also from drawing a line and moving on. You've said you'd die if you didn't live in the present, and yet your past is ever present because of the way that you've absorbed it into your work.
Yeah.
I mean, so much good has come from that, not least the Christmas Dinners project that we just discussed. But, is it all in the right place now for you?
It's a really good question, because when does the crisis become invisible? And for me, all of this, forgiveness, the things that we've talked about, especially forgiveness, allows me to do positive work. And the Christmas Dinners is positive work. I am often hounded by people in the negative. There are people who just yesterday there was somebody on Twitter who I knew 40 years ago who's just taking chunks out of me. I'm like, what did I do, man? We were both brought up in care, and here's you.
You responded to him, did you?
I did, yeah. I sent him a response because I was like, look, we were both in care. And he's like, yeah, but you think you're the care hero, and I know people who think that you're not. I'm like, and he's taking pieces out of me, and I'm trying to dial it down, but I'm stopping today. But the reason is that the reason I'm saying that is because forgiveness, and actually, I've got to say, a whole lot of therapy over a long time.
Yes, you're a great believer. You're a great believer in therapy.
I really am. Yeah. Ask for help, man. I mean, whether it's therapy or whatever, but because otherwise, I'm this guy who's taking pieces out of me, and I don't want to be him.
As you get to the next stage of your life, I guess what sits behind the question, I suppose, is does this story that's been such a core part of your life and a core part of your of who you are as a poet and as a writer, does that continue, or not?
Okay, so I have to accept that what I thought was the side story is the story. The sidebar is the story, and I have to now accept that that's all out there. It's funny, but you're asking this question, and it's very relevant to me actually at the moment. It is all out there. Google Lemn Sissay, and you'll see all the stuff, and that's all well and good. So I accept now that that's my story, that it's out there, and it's just okay. So what's next? What's gonna occur? Yeah. I've got projects, like I've always had projects, little Radio 4 series here, a bit of television there, judging the Booker Prize at the moment. That's coming to a head. A couple of public art, poetry things happening. So a couple of children's books, things happening. And I'll continue with that. And it's funny, isn't it? Because the crisis also changes the landscape. It's an earthquake. Why would it ever be the same again? It won't. And that's okay.
Yes. Well, Lem, all I can say is I'm very excited to see what comes next. Can we talk about your crisis cures?
Sure enough.
So these are 3 things that you sort of lean on in the tricky days. What would you start with?
Well, I'm going to start with music.
Yeah.
Because music, it's a very strange thing. It can kind of hook onto a time and a place, and an emotion all at the same time. And so listening to music can really lift me, actually, emotionally out of crisis and into a smile, or also into deep contemplation as well.
Yeah. Is there if I were only to give you one, I know you did Desert Island Discs and there was some brilliant music on that. If I give you a choice of one, I'm sure it's impossible.
No, I'll do the one that comes into my mind today. Might be different tomorrow, but when I used to get very depressed in this story in my adult life, I would drive out of Manchester up to Hebden Bridge, up even further into the Yorkshire hillsides, valley sides, to Hepton Stall. And there's a particular bench that I would sit on, park the car, and watch the clouds and listen to Swan of Lake Tuonela by Sibelius. Mm-hmm. And it's a classical music piece. And I would look out at the clouds and the valley and just see how small I was and how great nature is.
Wonderful. Your second crisis cure?
These are all connected, really, because this is to go for a walk, to actually walk physically. I don't do enough of it now. This is the problem. Crises make us find good answers to living. Mm. And then when we've not got a crisis, we don't use them. Because you know what I mean? We should do this all the time. But when I was a kid, I used to go out for walks. When I was in the children's homes, I used to walk out from the children's homes into green. I think that's important for me. I was brought up in the countryside. And I forget how much that's actually part of me and how soothing and it can be. And the reason walking is great is because everything changes. nothing's the same. Trees change from minute to minute. Water never stays the same in a stream. It's gone. It's gone to on its journey towards the sea or a lake or a river. So there's always new things to experience when you're walking. And I think that's really important, because when you're in a crisis, it feels like everything's stuck.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's like, how can I get out of here?
When you're in London, where do you walk?
Well, yeah, good question. I walk on the marshes. I live in East London.
Yeah.
So I go to the marshes, which are, 300 yards from where I live, maybe a bit more, 500. And there's
your third crisis cure, please.
Third crisis cure is meditation. Again, all of these are things that we should use on our everyday lives, but meditation is really important to me. Some people will pray, some people will have a God that they pray to, doesn't matter. But I think meditation is really important. And again, it's something that I should do every day, actually, but I don't.
Do you use an app?
Yeah, I do, actually. Yeah.
Headspace or something similar.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, there's something else I wanted to tell you. This is just for me, okay? So I don't want to jinx anybody. I stopped drinking alcohol. I haven't talked about this.
How long ago was that?
Well, I can tell you pretty exactly. It's 8 years ago. In fact, it's longer than 8 years ago.
And you were a big drinker?
I was a secret drinker, I think. A big secret drinker.
Yeah.
And I think, and I actually did end up getting help for it, which was the best help that I could get. And I want to say this to somebody, if there's somebody out there, one person, who is thinking, I'm in a crisis and drink is supposed to be helping me, and I feel like it's not, it's depressing me. There is help that you can get to stop drinking just for while you're in the crisis, or there's help you can get to so that you drink less.
Yeah. So
that you can get control over it. That's all it is. And actually helping you getting control over that will actually help you in the long run, actually, funnily enough.
Yeah.
I'm not telling anybody not to drink, actually,
Mm.
because most people can have a drink here and there, and that's fine.
But you've decided to stop altogether.
It was important that I did stop altogether.
Yeah.
So, in other words, what a crisis can do, it can give you things that you can falsely depend on. And that could be anything. It could be sex. It could be drinking. It could be drugs.
Yeah.
It could be any of those things. And I don't want to tell people, oh, you shouldn't do any of those things. I just mean,
get control of it.
Yeah, and allow yourself to talk to somebody about it as well to get control of it, and it'll help you. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to give you 4 cures then on that basis, and we'll make getting control of that as the 4th. Lemn, thanks so much for talking to us today. It's been a brilliant conversation. Really appreciate it. Just thanks for being so completely open and honest and giving us such a valuable kind of insight into how you've approached your crisis and how others, I think, will listen to this and take lessons from it. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And this is a great podcast. I mean, not me, but it's just a great idea for a podcast. So it's great. Thanks.
Oh, wonderful. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Crisis What Crisis. Do feel free to send us your feedback. You'll find our contact details and our show notes giving you the key insights from our guests at crisiswhatcrisis.com. There are more useful conversations on the way, so please do subscribe. And if you like what you hear, give us a rating and a review. It really helps. Thanks again.